Jeff Mason received his PhD from the University of London. He was a professor in London for over 26 years. He is the author of 3 books on philosophy and rhetoric. He is currently a professor at Cal State Fullerton and also at the Ocean Life Learning Institute here at UCI. He is someone who lives and breathes history and philosophy. He is a blogger on 93 philosophical sites. We are very fortunate to have him this morning. Please welcome Jeff Mason.
Okay, so can you hear me? Is the thing working? Okay, well, I'm very, very pleased to be here. I've been trying to get invited for a couple of years, but it's been hard, but I finally made it. And I want to share with you today thoughts which are mostly will be common. You'll already know it because you've been hearing the same sorts of things for a long time, because it turns out that wisdom is wisdom and it comes in many forms, but it says many of the same things. However, what you might not know is the role that philosophy has played in this over the years. Because if you go to a philosophy department these days and look in the syllabus in the university, it's pretty arcane, esoteric stuff, philosophical logic, and very technical questions about knowledge and metaphysics, and so on. But it wasn't always thus, okay? It wasn't always just an academic subject. And it grew up in the ancient world, in the Greek world, in response to a growing complexity of civilization, a cross-current of cultures, trade. People believed different things, they had different gods, they thought different things were true, and a reflective person looks at that and starts asking questions and says to themselves, well, they can't all be true. What's true? And how can we know? And that's how philosophy gets started. That and pure wonder at the amazing universe that we live in, and the creatures that live on the earth, and people, and the whole thing. So you have to understand that, okay, this philosophy grew up, and it had a practical dimension. It wasn't all theoretical. And especially with Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the people who came after them, philosophy had a moral purpose. It had a practical purpose. It had something to teach us about the art of living and how to be happy, which was taken by everyone in the ancient world to be what we're all looking for. Because if you look at your goals and purposes, you do A for the sake of B, and then you do B for the sake of C, and so on. But you're aiming at something that you want for its own sake, that it doesn't require anything else, that's complete in itself and requires nothing else. That's happiness. Everybody agrees in the ancient world anyway that we're all striving to be happy, but we disagree about what happiness is. We disagree about what we should aim at, but we all agree that it would be complete if we had it. We wouldn't need anything more, so you don't want it for anything else. Okay? So the idea that some things are ends in themselves and some things are a means to an end, right? And if you can make a confusion there, and if you confuse what is a means to an end with an end, you never reach the end, okay, which is happiness. But you look, the ancient world was no joke. It was really tough. I mean, you could be walking home from the market and a slaver would come along and take you off. I mean, there were pirates on the ocean. Life was very uncertain. And you could be minding your fields one day and the next day, 10,000 men in armors coming over the hill. I mean, you had it. So, is it possible to be happy in such an uncertain world? And you might ask, is our world any more uncertain than theirs was? It's riddled with uncertainty. The future is iffy. Is there a way to establish our happiness on something that's not so iffy, on something that's more substantial, something that's more long-lasting? And how could you attain that? And this is where the different philosophers weigh in, okay? And most of them, in fact, I'd say all of them, think that happiness has a highly moral component, that there's something about being a moral human being, about being just in your dealings with others, and that somehow having that virtue is a key to happiness. Now, if you think that happiness is just having happy feelings or pleasurable feelings, then that's not going to sit right, and there's different views about this. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to go through some of these ancient views about what you need to be and do to be happy. It's not easy, and it's not just whatever you think. I mean, I have to enter a caveat here, is that all these philosophers who are talking about the nature of happiness and how to be happy, they're all convinced that you really can't be happy unless you're a philosopher. Okay? So they are definitely biased, okay? They're definitely biased in what they say, okay? But you can still learn from them and take what you can. I mean, I believe in it being eclectic here. There's no one royal road to happiness, and philosophers would be fools to try to lay down what happiness should be for people. You know, if Homer Simpson wants to sit on his couch and drink beer and watch football and eat popcorn or whatever, and that's happiness for him, who am I to say it's not happiness for him? Okay, it's just not happiness for me. And it wouldn't be for a philosopher, and philosophers can give reasons for that. Philosophy is always about reasons, giving reasons, thinking, about, not contradicting yourself, not accepting bad evidence, not accepting fuzzy reasoning, but try to get clear about things and to give reasons for your positions. Not that you necessarily know what you're talking about, but at least you can give a reason. So, Socrates, I want to start with Socrates, because his philosophy is full of paradoxes. He says that the just man, I'll say man, but it's everyone, but the G says, the just man cannot be harmed. That virtue is knowledge. Excellence comes from knowledge. And that it is better to be thought to be unjust while you're just than to get away being unjust in this world. Because the only thing that matters is caring for your own soul. And to do that, you have to be moral, and you have to keep your integrity. Once you let that go, what good is anything else? According to Socrates. So this is rather radical. I mean, suppose you're doing something unjust and nobody catches you. Well, Socrates is going to recommend that you go right down to the police station and turn yourself in, because it's much better for you to be punished having done something wrong than to get away with it, because what's bad is hurting your soul. Here's another controversial point. People want what is good, and they want what is happy, and they're always doing what they think is good, right? Even if they don't know any better. So Socrates is forgiving here. There's no original sin, nothing like that. But people don't really make mistakes or err willingly. They err through ignorance. They err in not understanding what's really good, what the really important things are. They haven't reflected on their life in a global way, as a whole. They're just looking at it episodic one day after another, but you can look at it as a whole. So there's nobody's really evil. They just don't know how to get what's good. Furthermore, he points out that many of us get what we want, but that's not always what's best for us. So that Socrates seems to think that there's something in happiness that goes beyond just feeling good or saying, oh, I'm so happy today, or I'm not happy today. That really happiness is knowing what is best for us, okay, and learning that. And to be happy, therefore, we need to cultivate wisdom, courage, temperance, self-control, and justice in our lives. Those are the 4 cardinal virtues. And thus, you do something to make yourself a bit more impregnable against the shocks of life and fate deal out to you, which it will. See, it's one thing to be happy when everything's going all right. You're happily married, happy kids, happy house, and then, whoop, somebody dies, somebody goes to juvie, the house burns down, you lose your job. Now, how happy are you now, okay? Because no one can make you happy, no situation can make you happy. You have to make yourself happy, which is why I like Lincoln's quote, which is, we're just about as happy as we make up our minds to be. It's something that we do. It's not something that we wait for and then it just happens. Socrates' motto is know thyself. Gnothe sueton. The hardest thing to do because we're so close to ourselves. And we always judge the world from our own perspective. It's very hard, if not impossible, to get out of our own perspective. So know yourself. You know your own limits. You know your strengths. You know your weaknesses. And then instead of being hard on yourself about the negative things, you work to strengthen the good things and bring that more prominently into your life. Now, Plato and Aristotle have different accounts. Aristotle agrees with Plato that virtue is key to happiness. In fact, he says happiness is activity in accordance with virtue, and therefore we have to know what virtue is. And for Aristotle, it's moderation. Moderation in all things. This is called the golden mean. And so we're not to go overboard in this way or overboard in that way. So that courage, for example, is a mean between foolhardiness on the one hand, when you attack against all the odds and throw your life away, and when you retreat ignominiously as a coward and you creep away. And courage is in between. It's not about not being afraid. It's about rightly judging what's dangerous and how to respond to it. So when Socrates, as you know, he had to drink hemlock, he was condemned and everything. Who's to say his hand didn't tremble a little bit, when he drank the hemlock? But he was a courageous man. Doesn't mean you're not going to get butterflies in your stomach when you get up and talk to the inside edge. Okay, but after this, a number of positions come down about how to live, and they have very different views, some of which they overlap and some of which they don't. And I want to run through these. I don't have that long to go, but I want to talk about cynicism, hedonism, skepticism, stoicism, and Epicureanism. Okay? Now, these are all ancient philosophies, all designed to teach people how to live and how to not have so much pain in life and so forth. They had very different ideas, and we can reflect about that ourselves. So the first bunch are the cynics. I love the cynics. There are still cynics, right? There are homeless people down at Huntington Beach Pier that come drumming on a Sunday afternoon. They've got no shoes. They have a tin cup, around their belt, and ragged clothes, and they're living out of dumpsters, and they don't care. And they're out in the sun, and they're dancing and drumming, okay? They're cynics. Those are the cynics. That's what they did in the ancient day. Diogenes is the famous cynic. He was famous for giving up everything that everybody else wants: fame, glory, power, money, all that. And he threw it all away and lived in a barrel. He was famous for living in a barrel. And another story, this is just to tell you what the scorn that the cynics had for the conventional world that most of us live in, right? Which takes away from life, they thought. Cynic, by the way, means dogs. They were the dogs. So Diogenes had he had a little tin cup hanging around his waist, right? But then he saw a beggar boy over at the fountain drinking out of his hands, so he threw away the cup. And finally, the other great story I love about Diogenes, he's lying on the grass out in the field, and Alexander the Great is in Athens, because of course they had everything. And he comes over to Diogenes and stands over him, and the sun is casting a shadow on Diogenes lying in the grass. And Alexander says, "Are you Diogenes, the cynic?" He says, "Yeah, what of it?" He says, "Well, I've been impressed, by this radical way that you live. Now, is there anything at all I could do for you?" He says, "Yeah, move, would you? You're blocking the light. You're blocking the sun." That's how much he cared for a stipend from Alexander the Great. So the cynics claim, go back to the simple life. What do you need all these things for? Cynics, just get rid of things. Go lighten up. Go back to nature. Live with fewer possessions. Lessen your needs and desires. That's a big theme in these ancient philosophies. That Instead of having desires you can't satisfy because your goals are always beyond what your grasp, cut back on your desires, and they're a lot easier to satisfy. It's very, very simple advice. Become independent. You can't control the world, so control yourself. That's another common theme. It's not what happens, it's your attitude toward it, it's your response to it. That's what you can do something about. The cynics saw that very clearly a long time ago. You can't control the world, so control yourself. Furthermore, all human beings are brothers and sisters. We're all of one family. And all this tribal stuff, the polis this, polis that, all the fighting gets in the way of understanding in this simple way, we're all brothers and sisters. War and slavery are wrong. The cynics, war and slavery are wrong. Slavery was a slave society. I mean, slavery's wrong. They were one of the first peoples to say that. Of course, they were laughed at. Okay. Be cheerful in good times and bad times. Despise pointless displays of wealth. Men and women are equal.
What?
Yeah, this is in the 5th century BC, 4th century BC. Men and women were equal. Women didn't have a look into anything in ancient Athens. They were married. They went from their dad to their husband and everything with a dowry, and then he was totally in control, and she had to stay in the back, and she didn't get to go out, and that was it. She was sequestered. So to say that men and women are equal, that was a radical thing for the cynics to say. And then they were for free speech. Speak your mind freely and love freely. And if you can't do that, go and masturbate in the street. And that's what Diogenes was also known for doing. Anything to get in the record book, Because why? Because he totally flaunted convention, which is that you don't do that. Okay, those are the cynics. Okay, now let's turn to the hedonists. Now I love hedonism. Yes. What? The questions after a half hour. The hedonists. Happiness is about having the most pleasant life. Happiness is pleasure. The happy life is a life that has more pleasures than pain in it overall. This has been a very influential theory, and in the modern world it evolved as utilitarianism, which you may have heard of, which is a moral theory that says that everything right and wrong is really about what makes people happy, what makes them unhappy, what prevents suffering, what causes suffering, and that the goal of government and of our social life is to put in place systems and institutions that increase the happiness for everyone in the simple sense that it increases their happiness overall. So the people who believe happiness is pleasure in some way or another, they're happy with all the empirical studies that have been done. Like we did at the table talk, or I could hand out these questionnaires. How happy are you in these dimensions right now on a scale of 1 to 10? And we can do that. We can then ask your friends how happy they are. It turns out it jives pretty well. So we can do studies about what makes people happy as long as we don't make any judgments about what is the right or the best thing to do and just take what people want. Okay. So the hedonists say pleasure is the only good, and virtue is possessing the means to gain pleasure. Now they've got a bad rap because the Romans and their bacchanalias and their vomitoria, the whole well, when you have a 20-course dinner, and when you get too full, you have your forks and knives, and then you have a feather, because then you go to the vomitoria and you throw up, so you can go back and have the next 20 courses, right? Plus it would end in a sexual orgy, and I mean it was just whew. It was too much. That's the brush that tarred the hedonists. Actually, if you think about it, you'd be dead very quick if you had an orgy every night. You cannot do it, okay? The hedonists said, no. Calm pleasures, natural pleasures are the ones to cult. Not radical, over-the-top orgies and stuff like that. So the hedonists got a bad rap. They just want you to have, on balance, a life where you could say, I've had more pleasure in my life than pain. And everybody's going to have pain. And sometimes you have to accept pain for a greater good, like a root canal, You have to accept a root canal in order to increase your pleasure in other ways. So we'll do unpleasant things for pleasure. Okay, now let's turn to the skeptics very briefly. I'm a skeptic. I'm like an ancient skeptic. I'm not one of these epistemological skeptics like, I don't think that I'm the only creature in the zoo and they're just trying to make me feel like I'm connected by putting you androids out there. I mean, none of you are conscious. You could all surprise me by unzipping and showing me little glowing eyes and stuff. And I could say, and then the alien beings are looking at me. No, I'm not that kind of a skeptic. But skeptics are doubters. Skeptics do not take anything for granted, right? And when you tell them something, they don't believe you. Or not right off, and certainly not completely, and not because you've told them that. They'll always want corroborating evidence. They want to see it somewhere else. They want to work it out for themselves. Well, in the ancient world, skepticism was a means to attain peace of mind in an ideologically fractured world, where there were all these different religions and philosophies all competing and all saying, oh, we got the ultimate reality, like the Stoics and the Epicureans fighting it out about what's real. The skeptic says, we don't know what's real. Let's not trouble our heads about trying to decide matters which reason is incompetent to judge. Let's just stick with the customs that are around here and what common people ordinarily believe, and I'll go along with that. But I'm not going to get all in a flaff because I've got some dogma that I have to defend. Or somebody else has some dogma I have to attack. Think about all these ideological disputes. People, I know this, I know that. Well, you can't both know it. Everybody needs a course in Epistemology 101. They've got to know the difference between belief and knowledge. If you know something, it's true. If you believe something, it doesn't have to be true. So when you get two claims to knowledge, they both can't be true. So the skeptic says, suspend your belief. You know how when you read a story or you go to a movie, the old saying is, you're supposed to suspend disbelief? Well, in these disputes between religions and ideologies, suspend belief. And it sets you free from the turmoil of mind that you get when you're see, because the moment you try to uphold a dogma, you're going to have to be prepared to attack people who don't believe what you believe. And it just leads to nothing but big problems. So, nothing can be known for certain. The mind can be fooled. So find tranquility by suspending belief and just going along generally with what you find around you. And I like that because it frees my mind. I think a skeptic mind is a free mind because it's not held down by any dogma, any fixed beliefs. However, I am free to entertain any thought, go anywhere in thought, no matter how sublime or horrible or anything. Anywhere you want to go, I'll go with you because I don't have to believe it. Because I don't live my life in the believe it or don't believe it mode. Well, I could go on about the virtues of skepticism, but I won't. Stoicism. Now, Stoicism is something that worked its way into Christianity, so we're quite familiar with Stoicism. So, John Wayne, he's a good Stoic, out in the desert, running out of water, he's hot and sweaty, the flies are biting him. Does he complain? No. He just punches up and just keeps going, right? He doesn't complain. So that's what we think of as Stoic, or someone who dies from really painful cancer, but just couldn't be nicer, That never complains, never. No, that's stoical. So bearing misfortune with fortitude and realism, that's the hallmark of the Stoic. But in ancient world, it was a lot more than that. It was about learning the way of nature. Their great command was follow nature. But in order to follow nature, you have to learn what nature's laws are. You have to learn about the consequences of events and actions. So, and then, once you've done that, all you have to do now to be a good Stoic is you must do your duty. You must do the things that must be done. So you look after your family, you try to prepare for your retirement, you help your friends, you work for charity, all of this sort of stuff. As long as you're doing your duty, then no one can ask any more of you. And you're not going to be, okay, the Stoic says, you've got to go along with nature. You have no choice. He says it's like the dog with a collar and the rope that's being pulled by a wagon led by a horse, okay, the dog can either trot along after the wagon, or the dog can go and pull and, try to get away but can't, and then gets dragged. So are you going to go kicking and screaming, or are you going to go just, are you going to follow along? So knowing what your necessity is, okay? And don't worry about anything but what belongs to you. And if you think very closely about what belongs to you, very little belongs to you. Anything that can be taken away from you doesn't really belong to you. So the Stoics say your body doesn't belong to you, your life doesn't belong to you, your property doesn't belong, none of these things belong to you. Only thing that belongs to you is your mind and your will and your choice and your understanding. That's it. That's all you have to worry about. So, unfortunately, again, with the Stoics, you have to be educated to be free. And to be free is to follow nature. You don't want to let your passions and your desires control your life. The Stoics were very much that reason should rule in your life. Follow the rule of reason, not how you feel any good. You have to vet your passions and your emotions by reason before you engage in them. And you'll find if you do this that nothing much that people think are really important are that important. And that they said you should cultivate apatheia, which is unperturbedness of soul. And Zeno, the founder, who actually taught on something like this was a stoa. That's why they're called Stoics, because he taught on a porch called the stoa. He talks about the great indifference, the great things that we're meant to be indifferent toward, which we're not. Pleasure and pain. So the Stoic view is, pleasure is very nice but fleeting, it will go. Pains aren't very nice, you have to live with them, they'll go. There's nothing permanent in pleasure and pain. Therefore, don't get too excited about the pleasure, don't get too down about the pain. Then be indifferent to life and death itself. Everything is born is going to die. Dying is a natural process. There's nothing to be afraid of in a natural process. You're just going along with the rule of nature. Therefore, yes, you don't like it when somebody dies. You don't like it when you're dying. But it's part of it, and so you're indifferent to that, and you're indifferent to life. You don't love life, as in being really attached to it, but you don't hate death and try to escape from it. There's this middle role where, every day you're walking toward death, and you just accept that, and it doesn't disturb your peace of mind. Keep your will. Let no one break your will. Conquer yourself rather than the world. And finally, they also said that all men are family. They said that women are equal to men. Why? Because they said what characterizes a human being is their reason, their ability to think. Women can think. And the reason in women is no different from the reason in men. So there is no difference in that respect between women and men. Of course, that was found in Plato, who argued that women could become philosopher kings because the shape of their reproductive organs did not affect their ability to think rationally about things. Any more that you say, no one who's bald can be a plumber. It would be just as ridiculous. And finally, Epicurus. One of my real buddies, and it's amazing we have a word of Epicurus. It's amazing we have a word of the atomists, of which he's derived. The atomists were, a whole ancient world believed in gods and teleology and providence and on and on and on. But Leucippus and Democritus invented atomic theory, and they said, no. All there is matter in the void, and the matter is these little hard atoms, and they're bouncing around, and there's laws of motion, and that's all there is. It's just chance. There's no providence. There are no gods. They're just matter in motion. That's it. Little atoms bumping around. So Epicurus takes that on board. So he says, let us look. What is one of the great causes of misery for human beings? It's fear of death. Fear of death. Because we don't know about death. We don't know if there's something else. We don't know if it's the end. We don't know anything. You can believe what you like. He says that's bad enough, though when you think about it, death is nothing to me. Epicurus says, where death is, I am not. Where I am, death is not. Therefore, death is nothing to me. Therefore, death is nothing to fear. Because how can you fear nothing? Which is precisely what we do fear. But rationally, how can you fear nothing? And then he says, but not only do we fear death, which is nothing which we shouldn't fear, but we make things worse because we imagine a realm of the gods who are concerned about us, concerned with our behavior, and promise punishment or reward in the next bloody life. And Epicurus goes, how miserable this makes people. Oh my God, I have to, oh dear, oh no, St. Peter, oh please, I want all my plus things in the book, and forget the negative things. Somebody's watching, somebody's judging you, all the time. No, Epicurus says, look, either there are no gods, or if there are gods, they're happy. If they're happy, they don't need anything to do with us. We'll just bring them down. Think about it with your friends, okay? You're walking down the beach with a friend. Your friend is happy on their own right. You're happy on your right. And you're happy to be friends. And you're happy to be walking down the beach. And I'm happy that my friend is happy. And my friend is happy that I'm happy. And I'm happy that my friend is happy that I'm happy. And vice versa. And you can take that as long as you want. And it's this positive spiral where you're having a great time together. And you're both being happy together, though you're not relying on the other person to make you happy. And then take another friend who's really down one day, okay? So, and you're walking along the beach, and you're happy, but then your friend's not happy. So you're not happy, your friend's not happy. And then your friend feels bad for making you feel even more unhappy when you were happy, now you're not. And you feel bad because they feel bad because they think they're making you unhappy. And so it's a negative spiral down. So what the hell would the gods have to do with us? So if there are any, they don't have anything to do with us. So we don't have to worry about their punishment because there's no punishment. Death is the end, annihilation. The atoms go off into the void and recombine, and that's all it is for the Epicureans. So what does the Epicurean love more than anything? He loves his friends. Friendship for Epicurus is what you need to be happy. And he reputedly lived, you might have heard of the Epicurean garden. He did his teaching outdoors in his garden. And he would walk around his garden with his friends, and they would talk Epicurean philosophy. And then I see them all getting into hammocks, and lying there unperturbed on a summer's day, just enjoying the air and the flowers, Very simple. That's all you need. Is for Epicurus, plain living and high thinking. Because the great joy is in the high thinking, is in thinking great thoughts, great ideas, working them out. So I like that. So a sage loves his friends as he does himself. The angels are coming. So rather than, the Epicureans, again, they're tarred with this brush of rabid hedonism and, being depraved and decadent and everything. No. You want to live a long life, too. Not just a wild, exciting one full of, radical pleasures. So live prudently. Eat simply. They were on about diet. Okay? Exercise. Talk with your friends. That is all there is. You don't need anything else. So, the good can be won, the Epicurean said. We conquer the dread in ourselves. We aim to increase the happiness of everyone. We attain peace of mind. We live unobtrusively. And this philosophical activity promotes human flourishing. So it's really talking with his friends. That's the great pleasure. It's not a lot of physical pleasures. So he says, for example, if you look at where does pleasure come from? Pleasure is the satisfaction of desire. Can everybody get behind that definition of pleasure? So if you have a desire for food because you're hungry and then you eat, you will feel pleasure. If you're hungry enough, you'll feel pleasure even eating oatmeal. Or you'll even feel pleasure eating what's good for you, which is my problem. But so you live simply in harmony with others, and I mean, so that's a kind of a simple message. So these desires, any satisfaction of any desire is a pleasure, but the satisfaction of a disgusting desire is a pleasure. And the satisfaction of a noble desire is also a pleasure, right? So Aristotle says there are natural desires and then there are vain desires. Natural desires are mainly easy to satisfy, like the basics of something to eat. Once you've got something to eat, a place to live, and some clothes on your back, you've got the basics. That's really all that you need. Those are natural desires. So it's natural to drink, natural to eat. And sex, he says, is also a natural desire, and the pleasure of satisfying that desire is a natural pleasure. But he says that's problematic because it can lead to more pain than pleasure. So he says basically if you could control that side, that would be good. But as far as eating and drinking, and so you can do that, breathing. Okay, then there are vain desires, right? Vain desires are expensive, difficult to obtain, cost you a lot of time and effort. Like if I really set myself on I have to have a Lamborghini or I will not be happy. Well, I don't know when I'll be happy because how do I get the money for a Lamborghini? And then I have to think about that. I'm worrying about in order to get it. And then once I get it, if you're all reflective, you realize that a Lamborghini after 6 months turns into a car. Right? Just like your hot lover turns into a woman. No. It's good to turn into a woman. Okay, well, I think I'll just stop there. I've just outlined those. And if there's any questions. Okay, here first, yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enjoyable.
You're welcome.
I have a totally different question, but that has to do with philosophy. I wonder what philosophy today think about free will.
Oh, well, that's absolutely huge. And let me tell you about free will, what I think is true with a lot of philosophical disputes that go on forever, which is the proponents of free will present a theory. Then the proponents of determinism, which says everything we do is determined, they propose counter objections to that. And then the free will theory people come up with counter objections to that and counter objections. And this is how it goes. So you have a continual refinement of the question, but no definite answer. Why? Because it's a metaphysical question. And my own view is that the hallmark of a metaphysical question is no matter how much you can speculate about it, you can't know. So we can't know if we're free or not. Therefore, I choose to believe that I am free because I think it's better to believe that. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't care. It's a practical principle of mine, okay? Because I try to think, well, now, if I was a determinist, how would I live my life, you know? Well, am I going to wait for fate to do something for me, you know? It's hard not to live as if you were free, even if you're not. So that would be my short answer to that. Otherwise, it's insoluble. Yeah, interesting, though. Well, over here, somebody pick, yes.
Yeah. So, two things really. I found myself magically being drawn to the cynics.
I know. I find them fascinating.
Wow. And my hero, Henry Thoreau, must have been a cynic because of the simplicity and the withdrawal from society.
Yes, and the hippies too. And Thoreau was one of their hippie heroes.
So the two things. Number one, why are all of these terms in today's terminology negatives? Stoic, cynic, and so forth.
Because of religion. It's all because what was kept in the tradition was archived, produced, saved, and destroyed by Christianity in the West. That's how it all happened. The only reason that we have a lot of these things is because they ran out of paper And the monks copied the Bible on top of these ancient writings. And the only reason we know what Epicurus said is because he's underneath some Christian writing on top. And also, the Vatican collected Epicurus' sayings, and it's locked away in the Vatican library because the Catholics want to know who the enemy is. And he's enemy big time. That's why he was smeared. It was a whole smear campaign against him.
Wow. Oh, this is fabulous. My other I don't know if this is a question, it's an observation because I see it over and over again. You're dealing in ancient Western philosophy. Eastern philosophy is also ancient. And
we could do that too,
And happiness is critical in that.
In both.
You too, and so I would.
It seems like everybody's looking for happiness, though. We disagree about it.
East and West would also be.
Yeah, no, I know.
Could you tell me where philosophy ends and spirituality takes off, or what is the difference between? Somebody asked me the other day if I was spiritual. I said, well, here are my philosophies while I was trying to think about where I was spiritual.
It's a bit like Aquinas' view about reason and faith, where he said that against the know-nothings, like Tertullian, who said, I believe because it's absurd, and we shouldn't think, and it's Jerusalem over Athens and all of that. So Aquinas took sides on that and said, no, God would not have given us reason if he didn't mean us to use it. And reason operates under the natural light. And the natural light illuminates the natural world that we see around us. We should use our mind, our observation, our scientific thinking to get at that. But there's a point where reason ends and faith begins. So science ends and revelation begins. And they don't conflict, according to Aquinas. They're just different realms. So we should use reason. Now, the spiritual maybe is a little bit different. I mean, I feel the call of the spiritual, and I feel a mystical communion sometimes with nature and the oneness of everything, and sometimes I realize that the difference that I think I make in the universe is really no difference because I'm part of it, and so forth. So, and these oceanic feelings that Freud used to talk about, that all appeals to me, but it's all beyond philosophy. It's beyond philosophy. Because philosophy has to stick with what you can argue and reason about. You can't just take something on. You have to have reasons for it. So if you say, oh, well, it just comes on you and you have this feeling of oneness, well, great. It's a nice experience. But the phenomenologists? Well, the phenomenologists, nothing is outside their ken. So that what they would look at is how the phenomenon of spirituality expresses itself. But they would make no judgment as to its reality. Because the phenomenologists bracket off reality. They don't care whether it exists or not. They're just looking for the ideal forms of things. Phenomenology is great that way. Edmund Husserl. Bracket off reality, the whole question of epistemology, and say, how does it appear to us? And what are the invariants things in our appearance? So if you think about physical objects like this, one of the invariants of our experience of physical objects is they all are locatable in space, and they can all move around, and they have a front and a back. Now, it doesn't matter whether they exist or not, but that's our experience of them, and they all do that. And also, you tend not to be able to put your hand through them. They stop you. They feel solid. Those are all the phenomenal qualities of things. And phenomenology simply wants to describe the phenomenon, not to judge its external reality. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I think I'm leading toward skeptical Epicurean.
Hey, and throw in hedonism. I'm with you all the way.
And along those lines, with the 5 different things as we're going along, I'm thinking, in some ways, is that the Democrats, Republicans, different parties could be kind of located. But
that's interesting.
Question is,
yeah, you could.
If we've got the 5 basic philosophies going on in the world, if one is one way and one is another, how do they interact with each other and coexist peacefully?
They don't.
Is there any method or direction that could help?
Yeah, we could all become skeptics.
Uh-oh.
No, but again, the skeptics. No, all you're being skeptical about is the metaphysical and supernatural things you can't prove. That's all you're being skeptical about. So you want to believe it? Fine. I want to believe something else. That's fine. We can't prove it. So I'll let you go your way. You let me go my way. That's how we could do it. But you can't do that if you have a dogma. So skepticism is anti-dogmatic. That's its main thing. It wants to explode dogma. When a skeptic hits a dogma, he tries to explode it. You know, that's all he tries to do, because he doesn't have a view to put forward himself about the reality. But yeah, if we could get to the mindset of the pagan world, well, like the Romans, who welcomed all gods and all spirits and all agents, spiritual agencies into Rome. They had a big area there where they had statues to all the gods where you could give your thing, you know. And if they left one out, they had one there for the unknown god. Because they realized that different people see it differently, and there's no way to adjudicate it. There's no way to adjudicate these religious and ideological problems because there's no external standard from which to judge them. Yeah. Oh, who's next? Michael.
The microphone control.
Okay, yeah, the microphone.
So, Jeff, I just want to check my understanding. If I understand you right, then it would really only be the hedonists and the Epicureans that would be accepted at the social age.
That's right. That's right. Well, actually, I have to take that back. I think maybe Epicurus would be a little too severe for them. Yeah, because they'd have to drink just watered wine. Yeah.
Oh, I love this.
Thank you.
You prompted something that's Paul's dissertation on Mars Hill. I see you are very religious, and may I speak to your unknown God. It's a wonderful thing to read in the book of Acts. Anyway, what I wanted to say was I heard the Dalai Lama speak for 3 hours on what is happiness and the transient nature of happiness. You think, oh, this makes me happy, and then that's very transient. And finally he came down to, under that it all would come from a compassionate heart.
I think that's the big thing that we can add to the ancient Greek scenario. The merciful heart and all that. That's really more of a Christian thing as it comes down to us. It also, yeah, and Christian too. But I mean, for the Greeks, the 4 cardinal virtues are temperance, wisdom, courage, and justice. Then the Christians add faith, hope, and charity to those 3. And then there are 3 other virtues. Okay, so I was going to say, there's 2 ways of looking at happiness. One is in a linear fashion, when you look at your life as simply a series of episodes that you could give a happiness value to. So if you did a graph of your life, it would be going like that. But then there's another way of looking at your life as a whole, which you can ask, well, is this a happy life? And that's a deeper question than, do I feel happy? Or am I getting my desires satisfied? So the Dalai Lama is right in pointing out that on the linear episodic level, we are bobbing around in the ocean, and we have to understand that everything's changing and everything has multiple causes.
Well, even at our discussion at our table, it was communion or connection and contribution. And
Yes.
to me, that would be all.
I'm really glad you brought that in, because I think that's the big missing ingredient from the whole Western program in many ways. Finished. Finito. Finito. Thank you. Thank you.